Welcome to Among the Lilies. This is a show for ladies who are tired of pretending and are ready to be real. I'm your host, Cameron Frad, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about God having this. He's got this. He's in control, right? So I know we all know there's like all these sayings, right? Like anything that doesn't kill you will only make you stronger. And you've got this, girl, and all this stuff. And I'm just like, no, I don't think I've got this. I think I've been in many situations where I felt so far outside of my element. And I'm like, I do not have this. I can't do this. I lack what I need to do it. But in reality, God gives me the grace, like just in the nick of time. Sometimes I wish my cup would overflow with the grace. But I feel like when that happens, he's just like pouring me into a new cup, right? And so it's like, Lord, I need this much grace. And he gives me just enough, just when I need it. But you guys are so wonderful and so beautiful. And first off, I just want to thank you for those of you that are trusting me with your heart. I feel like a lot of my patrons are writing me messages and telling me about their life and their story. And a lot of you are going through a lot. And I just want to say thank you, first of all, for entrusting me with that part of your heart. And I don't have the answers for you. Some I can help. Some I'm like, oh yeah, I know what to do in this situation. I feel like if you've gone before the person and you're like, I can tell you what pitfalls to avoid, right? Like you don't want to go over here or over there, but you want to make sure you do this. I think that's why it's really important in our life to have someone that we love and look up to and is further ahead of us in the spiritual journey. We have this great, wonderful Among the Lilies Marco Polo group. And what I love is right now, one of our girls she was raised Mormon. And so she's sharing her story and I just think there's a lot about the way she was raised that some of us that were raised Catholic, like it's very different. We don't understand. And so we're like asking clarifying questions. And then she'll say things like this. Oh, wait, do I call it that? What do I call it? Still baby Catholic here. Let me know. And we've had others, before her that are new baby Catholics that just came into the church. One of our patrons, Sierra, came and helped me at my house. I know I've talked about her before. I had her on the podcast, but it was back when I was just audio. It wasn't video. So you wouldn't necessarily have saw her, but those of you on the group see her. But I love even things that she talked to my kids about. And they're like, what do you mean you're a baby Catholic? What does that mean? And just sharing that and like learning new things. And I love the way that we can support and help each other, but having someone that's gone there before us is really helpful. When I was on net, I talk about how I wasn't the baby on my team as far as age goes. There was a girl on my team who was 17. I was, I think, 18 or 19, but I was definitely the baby when it came to the faith. And I didn't know so much about what the church taught. I thought that I was like really Catholic because I knew a few Bible verses and I knew how to use the catechism. I didn't even have catechism verses memorized, but someone would bring up a problem about the church and what she taught. And I'm like, hold on, let me look that up. And it was just a friend of mine taught me how to use the catechism. And I was like, actually, the church teaches this. And it's like, how do you know that? I'm like, it's in this book. It wasn't a massive thing, but I just happened to own a catechism and know how to use it. So I felt like in my youth group, everyone's like, oh, Cameron knows everything about the church. And there was another guy, Charlie Mercer, and everyone would say that he had all the answers when it came to scripture. And I had all the answers when it came to what the church taught. And they kind of put us on a little pedestal for that. And I think I thought that I knew a lot about the church and what she taught in her beauty. But man, I was a baby. I did not know... I didn't know so much. I didn't know my worth and dignity. I don't know. I feel like Sunday nights, I knew that this is who I needed to be and use the catechism. But Friday and Saturday nights, I got really confused in the party scene. And at school, I was also confused to who I was supposed to be, trying to be whoever the person in front of me needed me to be. So I put on a lot of different masks. But when I went on net, I was very surprised. I looked around. I was like, oh, holy moly, these people are like really holy. They like pray and stuff and they really know God. All of them like memorized catechism verses and Bible verses. And I was just so outside of my element and I just didn't know. And one of my teammates in particular that I'll talk about, Annie, her sister was a sister of life and her sister would write her these wonderful letters and she'd let me read some of them and share with me. And I had never technically I went to Catholic school when I was little, and we technically had, I think my sister was in 8th grade and she had like a nun that was a teacher. And I think the principal was a nun. I think we called her sister something, but I don't think either of them are still sisters today. And they were part of an order that didn't necessarily, how do I say this charitably? That maybe didn't know their worth and identity as an order. And they were just kind of changing as other things were changing. My son Liam and I went to a restaurant the other day, and he said, Mom, this place is messed up. Like, what is it? Like, we have a 4th of July red, white, and blue thing over here. We have Mexican stuff over here. There's pizza stuff over there. There's a random picture of a baby. I'm not even making this up. There was a random picture of a baby on the fireplace mantle. And then there was decorations of little dogs. And then there also was ice cream stuff and an ice cream parlor section. And he's like, he was kind of poking fun. I'm like, Liam, we need to be charitable. And he's like, I'm not trying to be mean, but they don't know who they are. Like, what is this? Is it a Mexican restaurant? Is it an Italian restaurant? Is it an ice cream shop? Is it having a baby shower for this baby? Like, who are they? And I thought about it. I was like, he's right. They don't know who they are. Like, they don't have their identity down, right? And I think sometimes we fall into that. And unfortunately, this religious order fell into that, but the Sisters of Life do not fall into that category. And it was just really beautiful to get to know religious sisters. And I got to know them through my friend Annie, who is now actually a nun in Italy. But she was she was older than me. She was like, I think mid-20s, but she was so much further along in her faith. She grew up, both her parents, very devout Catholics. They grow up going to mass, learning all their sacraments. She has siblings that are married with beautiful holy families. Her sister was, entered with Sisters of Life, and she was around these amazing orders, and she just knew so much. And at no point did she make me feel bad for not knowing as much as her. She just lovingly helped lead me and teach me. And I think when we find ourselves in situations where someone knows less than us and we want to help them, we're not thinking bad of them. We're just like, oh, just so you know, these are some things to help you out, right? And I think that it's good to do that. For some people, it's really easy. For others of us, it's a rocky road and it's hard getting there. And I think sometimes we think that we have to have the strength to do it. The kids and I the other day walked from our house. There's Beatty Park. There's like a park behind our house in Steubenville. And we walked down and through it. And then it brings you out to like one of the main streets. And they walked multiple roads down. There was a Greek festival going on. It was really hot. And by the time we got there, everybody was just exhausted and probably a little overheated and just really tired. And we had fun. It was great. But on the walk back, I remember saying, we stopped at the library and read books and took advantage of the AC and like made sure everyone like cooled down all the way before we walked home. But I remember as we were walking home, one of my daughters said, I can't go on. I don't have the strength. Leave me behind, in a very dramatic way. And I'm like, I'm not going to leave you behind. You can do it. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And she just kind of was like, I don't think he's strengthening me. I don't think I can go on. I was like, okay, sweetie, I love you. You need to ask for the grace. God, please give me the grace to finish walking, to make it up this. Because once you walk through the park, there's like these crazy steps that you have to go up and it's really steep. And I'm like, just pray for the grace to get up the steps one by one. We can do it, And we persevered and we got up there. But I think there was multiple times that my kids thought they weren't going to make it. And I also thought I wasn't going to make it. But I had confidence, Lord, you will give us the grace. Please give us the grace that we can do this one step at a time. I have so many questions from you guys. I'm going to answer some of them on here. That's what I try to do. Answer some of the questions here on YouTube for everyone. And then other questions I do over on Patreon. And I just want to thank you so much, all of my Patreon members, all the questions that you're asking. It is good. But I think more than I can like give you advice on these things, I just want you to know God's got this. I think in moments that we find ourselves where we don't know what the next step is, whether it's the fact that you're single and maybe in your mid-20s and have never really had a boyfriend and thinking like, okay, will I ever get married? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Like, that's a hard spot, but like, being like, okay, God's got this. God knows exactly where you are. He knows the situations. He knows the people around you, like trusting him with that. Or if you're dealing with your father or mother who's sick and basically dying, and you're having to walk them through these last days of their life, like by God's grace, he'll give you the grace there. I have a friend recently. I actually have two friends recently whose parents have died. One of my friends, it was her mom, and the other friend, it was her dad. And I was just so in awe of the way these women are friends of mine, and we have like this community of women on Marco Polo, and they just, I don't know, so beautifully share their hearts with us other women. And we got to really be with each other through that and pray for and intercede for each other. One of them, I actually had a situation this morning where children were fighting, and I just was very angry. And my immediate response was anger, and was to grab this child by the face and shove their face in the dog poop. And I clarified with my friend. I called her and I was like, hey, she's like, oh, I'm about to walk into mass. I only have a minute. I'm like, I only need a minute. I'm driving home, but I'm really frustrated. And this is what I want to do. I want to take that child's face and rub it in dog poop. I know that's probably not what I should do. And she was just so beautiful and so loving. And she wasn't judgmental at all. And she's like, okay, Cameron, first off, that child is hurting. Yes, they are reflecting their anger at your other children, and probably at you and at the dog and at the situation of the dog pooping on the floor. But ultimately, it's what's going on internally. That child is dealing with not loving himself or herself. The anger is within. So when there's anger boiling over within, it's going to come out at different people, right? And there's different things that different kids are going through, and hormonal years add to that, right? I know one of our patron questions was about that with teenagers, and I know that's really hard. And even with toddlers, I feel like toddlers and teenagers are really similar. They're both hard to parent. Some are way cuter than others. But yeah, it's hard. And my friend was so beautiful. She just heard me where I was, and she's like, God's got this. Like, he will give you the grace to deal with this in this situation. I'm going to go into mass right now, and I'm going to pray for you and this child and the other children that are affected by this child being angry and upset. And I'm praying for you, but you need to respond with love and try to hear this child out where they are. Ask him or her how they're feeling. Sorry, I'm doing like this him or her thing because I don't want you to know which child of mine this is. And so I have both boys and girls. But letting that child like share their heart and what's really going on, and get to the bottom of it, and try to keep loving them. Like, you're only going to help them with love, not anger. Like, if you grab this child by the face and shove it in the poo, you're making the situation 1,000 times worse. If you're watching and you've done that before, no judgment here. I get it. But God's grace is enough, and he will give you the grace to overcome that horrible thing that you did about shoving their face in the poo, or yelling or screaming or whatever it was. We've all lost our patience and our cool with others. Whether it's a child or someone you work with. I remember talking to someone who was working with elderly and saying how hard it was because they don't remember anything, and they're asking you the same questions over and over. And this person's naturally very gentle, mild, meek, and they said that they found themselves getting angry with different patients. So I think until our patients have been tested fully, we can't judge. We can't say, oh my goodness, I would never do that. That's horrible. I know for me, we were at a restaurant the other day, and my daughter spilt her water and it went all over the place. And it was as the waitress was bringing the food, and she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And the waitress was like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm like, Kiara, I told you which kid did it. It doesn't really matter because she wasn't scandalized by it. But I said, Kiara, it's okay. Don't worry about it. They'll get it cleaned up. Here, I'll move this. And I'm just moving stuff off the table. And the guy comes over with some towels, and he's like, yeah, it happens all the time. Mom, really, it's really normally the mom that freaks out more than anyone else in these situations. Thanks for being cool and not yelling at your kid. And I just thought, wow, how many times has this waiter seen moms ripping their kids new ones because they spilt water at a restaurant? Like, obviously you love your kid more than you love what that restaurant thinks of you, right? But in the moment, there's like a quick reaction, right? And we just yell, or we just, I don't know, whatever we do. We move the kid a little too quickly, or whatever it is. But I think we need to be more patient with ourselves and with those around us, and more loving, and ask for the grace. It's really hard to do it. Someone told me early on, if your kids do something that upsets you, and this applies to normal life too, but I'm talking as a mom's point of view, because these are just the things popping into my head right now as I'm chatting with you. I have plenty of mom examples. But they said, if your kids do something that you're probably going to freak out over, take a picture. Go get the camera. Well, now we all have phones in our pockets, so you just pull it out of your pocket. But at the time, I don't think I had a cell phone. Go get the camera, take a picture, and then react, right? And so I have this picture of my two oldest kids when they were really little. I think they both were in diapers. And my son got into the flour, and he took this white flour and just kept pouring it on his sister's head. And she kept laughing. And the two of them, I just walked upstairs to, I think, get a diaper, because one of them had a dirty diaper, and I walked down and there's flour everywhere, and they're covered in flour. Like, it's all over the kitchen. This poor girl has it all over her face, both of them, all in their hair, all over their face. And I took a picture, and it's one of my favorite pictures. And I think, had my friend not have given me that advice, I probably would have started yelling or crying or screaming or something, because my husband was gone at work, and it was a long day already. And it was like, are you kidding me? I'm already dealing with two toddlers, trying to cook dinner, trying to get this stuff done. And now there's flour everywhere. And then I didn't think in the moment, but I took the picture. So I didn't like overreact, but I was still frustrated. But then I took my baby girl, put her in the tub, and tried to shampoo her hair. I know what some of you are thinking. Flour and water make dough. I just caked her in dough. She was now like the Pillsbury dough girl. And it took forever to get all the dough out. But the reason I tell you that story is because God gave me the grace in the moment to deal with it. And I know you're probably dealing with something way more serious than your child being covered in flour or dough. But I think just in those little examples, it's like, okay, we can choose sometimes we can't choose, and it's just like a guttural reaction, and we just do. But I think it's good to look at those times that we do that and say, okay, God, what can I do next time? Next time, if this same situation happens, how can I respond more lovingly or more kindly? And then do that. I know for me, on days with my kids, when I was just stressed out dealing with littles, I'd have play dates. I'd have other friends over with their kids, or I just have another friend. And I knew that I would be more patient or more loving in my response to them if I had another person there. Yeah. And then as far as just whatever rough situation you're going through, find friends you can talk to about it. I love, as I said, I have these wonderful Marco Polo groups, and I love that we can share our hearts with one another and look out for each other. And it's important. We need that. I'm going to do a few Q&As before we end. So I'm going to open up my Patreon app and ask these people. So just in case you want to ask questions. So patreon.com/amongthelilies. That's where I get all my questions from. And I'll answer some on the episode like this, and others I answer behind a closed door on Patreon. And those are things of the more intimate nature. I want to get enough money so I can have a studio in my own house here in Steubenville. So I'll have a camera, lights, all that cool stuff. Probably I'll do it after bedtime. After my kids are in bed, I'm going to interview another woman and hear their story. And just, they're amazing. I actually, I have so many women that I want to interview that live here and also that travel through. Like Matt just had Sister Miriam James on last night. If you haven't watched the episode, watch it. I've only seen like half of it, but so far it's really, really good. And I love her, and she's so wonderful. And I would love to sit down and have a chat with her, for y'all. And then just so many of my other amazing, wonderful, beautiful friends. And I miss the interaction. I feel like it's weird that I'm talking to a camera. Like, I'm trying to picture who I'm talking to through the lens. But I much rather be talking to the girl across from me and sharing her with y'all. So I look forward to doing that. Those of you that are on Patreon, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of these questions. So Jesse says, this is a everyone question, not just for Patreon. Since you just moved to a new area, what are some ways we can welcome and love new families in our town. I figure you have a lot of ideas. Just had a new family move in down the street from us, and they're Catholic. Yay. Homeschoolers. Yay. It's a rarity in her area. I think that's super fun. Okay. Related, do you have advice for growing a community? Okay, so the first thing, welcoming new people. I feel like when we've lived in places in the past, I've always, whenever someone new moves in, I try to make them something. So I bring them, like we do sourdough bread. So I normally bring over sourdough bread, or the kids and I have made cookies for them. And we just walk over, introduce ourselves. Hi, welcome to the neighborhood. Here's whatever we made for you. If you need anything, let us know. Funny story, in Ireland, I tried this. And I walked, so the house that we lived in was technically owned by a nun that lived across the street. And I walked over and I made like caramel brownies, you know, those yummy gooey brownies that have like chocolate chips that are melted in the caramel gooiness. Anyhow, I put them on a plate, all beautiful. And I put saran wrap over it and I walked it over to give to her. They don't do that in Ireland. So she's like, oh, well, thank you so much. No, I'll just take one or two of them. No, oh, it's grand. Thank you so much. No, I really appreciate it. No, you keep the rest. And so she's thanking me, but she has caramel and chocolate like dripping all over her hands. And she's like, no, take your plate back. No, you're grand. I'm like, I can get it from you later. And she's like, oh no, this is grand. Thank you so very much. And she was very appreciative for it. But I was like, I would have made something more simple, but I could still picture the caramel and chocolate like oozing all over her hands. I think when we moved into this house, we had multiple neighbors that like came over and said hello and brought us, you know, a bottle of wine. My neighbor next door, I don't even really know her. Like I feel like the longest conversation I had with her was when we moved in. But she was so kind. She brought us something and all the kids started saying they were hungry and they wanted to get food. And we didn't have food in the house yet. And I think Matt had the car. I didn't have the car. And I was telling him like, okay, we just got to wait till daddy gets back. She's like, I just went to the grocery store. Do you guys like oranges? Do you like grapes? And they're like, yeah. And she brought over a bag of grapes and a bunch of oranges. And my kids were like over the moon thrilled. And it was just so loving and so kind. And so even things, I don't know, just responding to something, you know, our street is beautiful where we do this and help each other. If we're missing something, we ask to borrow it from a neighbor, or we give it to a neighbor. I have a friend who does catering and she'll have leftover food and she keeps giving me the most amazing food. And she's like, hey, I have leftovers. You want some? I'm like, yes, please. That would be amazing. And it's just, I don't know. I love it. Okay. Let's see more of the question. Do you have advice for growing a community? I think showing up, you know, and inviting people into your mess. I think that's huge. Not having your house perfectly together before you have to have guests over and invite people over. Let me see. This sounds weird. Basically, we can't up and move to Steubenville like y'all, but how do you make a Steubenville style community here? I'm starting with a big cookout at my house for the nativity of St. John the Baptist. That sounds awesome. And we're inviting our priests and lots of friends and the new family that I mentioned. That's perfect. Oh my goodness. I don't even know why you asked me this question. You know what to do and you're doing it. And that's amazing and wonderful and beautiful. I know when we lived in San Diego, we had friends that would invite people over probably almost every week. And it was great. And the priests would come from the church too. And it was like just Sunday afternoons. We'd often go to their house and the priests would be like in their full cassocks, like dunking basketballs. And it was just lovely and good. I think just being hospitable and having people over and inviting people into it. Yeah. And I think just not being afraid. Okay. And this is the last line of this. I'm an extrovert and always worried that I'm being overbearing. So when you hear something in you saying like, oh, don't be too much for them, don't listen to that. That is Satan having that thought in your head. Okay. Don't listen to that. Like you are not too much. You are wonderful and beautiful. And the fact that you're welcoming them into your home is massive and huge. I have other friends that like have anxiety every time they have people over. They still do it. But prior to them coming over, they like are almost paralyzed with anxiety. And they're just like, oh my goodness, why am I doing this? Okay. I can do this. I can do this. And they have to like talk themselves into doing it. But then they love it and they love having people over, but it's hard. And I think just putting yourself out there, that's huge. And community is huge. Okay. I'm going to do one more question on here and then I'm going to wrap us up. Okay. How to gracefully bring up Christ in conversation after avoiding the topic for years. And have it not be awkward. I think one thing is not looking at someone and being like, do you know Jesus? Matt does this weird like funny face thing. I think so I'm going to tell you someone that just does a really good example of this. So there's a place in town. I've already talked about them before, All for Kids. It's like a gymnastics place. My son's doing like a little ninja camp there today. But they are so pro every human person. My girls are thinking about entering like the team for the gymnastics. Like they've gone through all the lessons and like they could potentially be at the team level now. And in it doesn't say... They word things in such a way where it upholds the dignity of the human person, and they need to present themselves in a way and speak to the other girls in such a way that's a positive, loving environment, and telling the parents, like, we want you to come not participate in meets, but like actively watch your child and things like this. But you need to not give criticisms from the side. Like, we're here to build each other up, and different girls have different skill levels, whatever, but it's all about being positive. And even when you're there, it's, I don't know. I know that they're Catholic. I think most people going in, if you're a Christian, you know they're Christian, but if you're not, I don't think you do. You just think they're really great people. There was a woman, Dawn, that I interviewed forever ago on this podcast, and it was helping strangers because you can. And my son had knocked out his 2 front teeth, and I walked into the dentist's office, and it was deer in the headlights. Everybody just like, he literally knocked out his 2 front teeth, and he was gushing blood. And I had the teeth, they were like this big, roots and all, in my hand. And I walked in, and everybody just deer in the headlights. I'm telling him to go back. He was like 7, maybe 8, and he didn't want to. He wanted to be with me, but I had 3 little kids in the car. And this woman just put her hand on me, looked me in the eye, and said, "I'm here to help. What do you need?" I was like, "I have 3 other children in the car." She's like, "I will get them and bring them in. You go to the back with your son." I was like, "Okay, thank you." I handed her my keys and walked off. Normally, I wouldn't hand my keys to a stranger who I've never met before. But this woman got my kids out of the car, brought them in. The dentist's office was wonderful and helpful. But this woman not only stayed while her son was like getting a cleaning or whatever, her husband drove her son home. She sat in the waiting room for 3 hours with my kids as I was in the back with my little one having an emergency surgery, right? It was crazy. It was crazy and chaotic. And afterwards we talked about her and we exchanged phone numbers. And one of my girls said, "Oh yeah, Dawn's definitely Catholic." And I looked at her and I smiled and I said, why do you say that? And she's like, "Well, she knows Jesus." And I'm like, "You're right. She does know Jesus. I think she knows Jesus and loves him because she acted that way. She acted with love upon us." I don't know if she's Catholic or not, but I think you're right. She's a friend of Jesus. And afterwards I had her on the podcast and we chatted, and turns out she is Christian. But I love that my daughter knew it. She didn't tell her. She didn't say, when she's sitting there watching like an Elmo video with my 2-year-old and interacting with my girls, chatting with them, smiling. She didn't say, "Do you guys love Jesus? Because I love Jesus." She just embodied it. She loved as Christ loves. I think you meet people and you're like, wow, you radiate Christ. I know that a lot of us, this is what we pray when we go to Mass. Like prior to receiving the Eucharist, "Lord, remove anything and everything in me that is of me, and just remove it all so you can fill me and overflow within me, so that when people come and they meet me, it's not me they see, it's rather you in me, Jesus," right? And yes, we're all created in the image and likeness of God. There's so many good things, but I think praying that he would just, I don't know, flow out of us and radiate from us. That is how you evangelize, right? And I think you can have it come up in conversation. I could honestly do a whole episode on this, and there's more to the question, and I'll read it later and get more into it. But I think just by being Christ-like, right? By just loving the way Christ loves. Yeah, so I'm going to try to do that today. You try to do this. Tap in. God's got this. You don't have to have it all together. You don't need everything perfect. The Lord's got this, okay? Entrust it to him. If you want to tell someone about him, pray about it and ask for the promptings of the Holy Spirit and say, "You let me know when I should say something, or how I should say something, or how I should have this conversation." Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As I said before, you can support us over on patreon.com/amongthelilies. God bless.